Word. So we want to thank all of you first for coming out, taking time out of your schedule to come see us and listen to what we have to say. We also would like to very much thank Ron Paul Institute co-sponsors that have helped us get here, and their names are on the back of our little Freedom Report that we've handed out. So we're very grateful to these people for helping us out. The Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity started, believe it or not, 5 years ago this month. It was April 18th, I think, 2013, where we had our opening up on Capitol Hill. And in those 5 years, we published probably 6,000 or 7,000 articles on our website, ronpaulinstitute.org. We've had millions and millions of visitors. They tried to strangle us in the crib, of course, the day we opened. Jamie Kirchick and a lot of the neocons were talking about how dangerous we were, which made us very energized and very happy and very excited. So we've done that. We've done, this is our fourth conference, and we're so fortunate to be doing it with Jacob Hornberger and the Future of Freedom Foundation, which is one of my absolute favorite groups out there. So we're really thrilled to be with them. And so this is our fourth conference at which we've sold all of our seats. It looks like some stragglers, but technically our 4 sellouts in a row, so we're happy, very happy about that. Some of you may have heard of a little show called the Ron Paul Liberty Report that we do in our little studio at Clute, Texas, and it's really a lavish studio. It's you wouldn't believe it's state of the art. Actually, the studio is state of the art, but anyway, so we do that, and we've actually had a big surge. I was teasing Dr. Paul that unfortunately war is kind of profitable for us too, because our viewership has skyrocketed after Trump decided to send some missiles over to Syria. But we have about close to 140,000 subscribers to our YouTube channel. We've had something like over 11 million views of our program the past 3 years. We do it Monday through Friday on YouTube. YouTube/Ron Paul Liberty Report. And so we spend a lot of time doing that and a lot of outreach doing that. And we're just absolutely thrilled to be here talking about one of our favorite topics, the most important topic, non-interventionism. It's a broad topic. It's foreign policy. It's in our lives here at home. They all come together, as Dr. Paul always says. But we are so thrilled, and we hope that we can provide you with some stimulating information and discussion, and most importantly, for all of you to get to know each other. This is the strength of our movement. This is why we come together rather than just watch videos. To meet each other, to share experiences. You never know, you may strike up a business deal or a friendship. So important to get together. This is what scares the authoritarian state away. This is what, as Bumper always says, authoritarian societies do not allow. So thank you very much, and welcome to the conference.
All right, I'd like to offer my welcome as well. I'm Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation. Our mission at FFF since the very beginning, some 29 years ago, has been to present an uncompromising moral, philosophical, and economic case for the free society. And we're really excited to be here. This is actually my third time to this beautiful city, and it's really nice to be back, and it's especially nice to be here to share ideas on liberty with everyone here. We're especially excited to be doing this program with the Ron Paul Institute. We all have our heroes in history, right? Well, Ron is one of my real-life heroes that's still here. And gosh, he's played such an instrumental role in the advancement of liberty, as everyone in this room knows. When he first was running for president on the GOP ticket, my vice president, Bart Frazier, and I, we went to New Hampshire, and we went door-to-door campaigning for him because he inspired us. We believed in what he was saying. He was speaking truth to power. And then I had the good fortune of speaking at some of his campaign rallies, one in Philadelphia. And so when Dan contacted me and said, would y'all be interested in doing a joint program on foreign policy, I mean, we didn't hesitate. We know that the Ron Paul Institute and FFF are on the exact same page when it comes to this burning issue of our time. And so we said, absolutely, count us in. And so that's how all this got arranged. And then we came up with the idea of having it here in Charleston because a longtime friend and supporter of ours, a local guy named Walter Carr, has been pleading with us to do a program in Charleston for many, many years. And we finally said, okay, Walter, get him off our back. And we're so happy we did. And as a matter of fact, Local Boy Makes Good. Walter, many of you know Walter. He's been here. He says he's not a native to Charleston, but he's been here 50 years. And he's recently become a member of our Board of Trustees at the Future of Freedom Foundation. He's been a longtime supporter and friend and personal friend, and we're really honored and pleased that he would join our board. You'll find written materials on your chairs that we've put out. As all of y'all know, or probably you know, this is final exam week, so you do have homework here. We expect a term paper based on these written materials by the end of next week. I know there's some of you supporters that have come a long ways, longtime supporters of FFF, been with us for 29 years, and we couldn't do it without you. And we would invite you, those of you that are not familiar with FFF, we'd invite you to become acquainted with us and size us up with the quality of this program today. We're a small foundation, but we got a lot of heart. We believe in the power of ideas, sound ideas on liberty, to transform a society. And that's what we're about. We're about changing the world, and especially that part of the world that's right here in the United States. And we believe in the importance of principles. When I said that we present an uncompromising case for liberty, I meant it. That if you go back over our written literature for the last 29 years, you will search in vain for any compromise of any libertarian principle in any of our written materials and all the thousands of articles. And why is this? Because we believe that sound ideas on liberty and adherence to principle are the best way to achieve what everyone in this room wants to achieve, and that's a free society, prosperous society, harmonious society, and of course a peaceful society, which is what this conference is all about. And we rely on voluntary donations, just like the Ron Paul Institute does. And if you like our overall perspective, you like our passion for liberty, our love for liberty, we would like to invite you to consider becoming a donor to FFF and the Ron Paul Institute as well. That we rely, as you can imagine, the $5 doesn't begin to cover the cost of a program like this. But our formula has always been, look, charge a nominal fee or even free. We go into college campuses, and of course we don't charge anything. And then hope that people believe in what we're doing, and then fund us with donations. And that's how we put programs like this together. In fact, one of our newest programs that we're really pleased with is we noticed we were taking our conferences on the drug war and the horrors of the drug war to college campuses. And we noticed that African American students were not coming to our programs. So we decided to do something about that. And so we dug up a list of all the historically black colleges and universities, and we started making contacts with students there and professors there just in the blind, sending them emails saying this is what we want to do. And now we have this program established at FFF to go into HBCUs and take our program to them. And we've done one in Morgan State in Baltimore, another one at Florida A&M in Florida, and we're working with 3 other student groups now and professors to do more in the fall. And that's where your donations fund. That's what your money goes to. And so those of you that are here, I know you travel long distance, some of you, and we're grateful for that. And we're grateful for your support. And and if you join our Freedom Club, FF Freedom Club, with a $250 donation or more, you get a video message from me every month. So thank you very much for coming. It's hard. I wish it were raining outside, because I know there's an opportunity cost with this beautiful weather after this horrifically cold winter. Thank you for coming, and I think we're going to put on a really good program. That's our goal here today. We got 4 speakers. I think you'll enjoy all of them. But as a prelude to that, we have the honor and pleasure of having a special guest to share his perspectives on this important issue of our time. I know Mark Sanford is in a heated political race, and so I want to give him a little bit of political cover here. He is not here to endorse the Future of Freedom Foundation. He's not here to endorse the Ron Paul Institute. He's here accepting our invitation to share his perspectives on this burning issue of our time. And we appreciate him taking the time to do so. Please welcome Congressman and former South Carolina Governor Mark Sanford.
I'll be exceedingly brief because I have absolutely nothing to add to the equation this morning. Jacob, I appreciate so much the chance to be here, though. I appreciate the chance to be with you all. I'm here really for three reasons. I'm here, one, because Ron Paul is here. And when I was last in Congress, there were a whole lot of votes where it'd be whatever the number was to 2 on the Republican side, and it would be myself and Ron. Inevitably, I'd go up to Ron and say, well, why are you voting as you are on this one? And he would explain it, and as he always does, he'd be crystal clear in his logic, he'd be sound in his reasoning, and he was an inspiration then, and he's an inspiration now. And since he was in this neck of the woods, I wanted to come by just to say, I appreciate what you've done at many different levels to advance liberty in our country, and I'd ask that you give him a round of applause. I'm also here because Wally Carr is a friend who's right up here. He said, come on by for a minute. And if folks at home say, come on by, you say, yes, sir. You click your heels and you salute. And most of all, I'm here, though, to say thank you for what you're doing. This notion, as we all know, of preserving freedom within an open political system is an amazingly delicate balancing act. And if you look at the pages of history, more often than not, it's been lost rather than gained. And so what you all are doing in having a discussion about non-intervention and how that is part of the formula to preserving liberty, I think to be incredibly important, and therefore want to come by and say thank you for what you're doing. I jotted down a few notes. I observed this. Never-ending wars are horrific from the standpoint of building enemies, from shredding Congress's traditional role, from wearing out troops, from the standpoint of sending conflicting signals to both allies and opponents alike, and in spending trillions of dollars. But before I get into any of that, I would say, one, welcome to Charleston. As Jacob just mentioned, it's gorgeous outside. I highly recommend that you get out and explore. I grew up on a farm about an hour south of here. So Charleston itself is not an area unfamiliar with conflict. And if you go down to the farm that I grew up on, oddly enough, it was the dividing line between the North and the South for the first 3 years of the Civil War. Because the Union, with its superior naval capacity, had come in and immediately captured Beaufort and the surrounding sea islands, and they set up their southern blockade headquarters from there. And yet they didn't have the strength to pierce the mainland, if you will, of the South. And so there was this, frankly, not uneasy, but very easy truce that existed there on the banks of the Coosaw River with the Confederates on one side and the Union on the other. It became so routine that there was a gunboat, the George Washington, that once a week would circle the sea islands to make sure that the Confederates weren't up to something funny. And it became so routine that they, in fact, stopped one day to actually anchor and go fishing in front of the farm that I grew up on. The river is very wide in front of the farm that I grew up on, maybe 1.5 miles or so wide, maybe 2 miles. I mean, very wide river at this point. It's opening up out into the ocean. They stop and go fishing. Well, it turns out the Chisholm family, who's there on the place, they happen to have a cannon in one of the barns. They wheel the cannon out. To their amazement, they hit and sink the George Washington. 900 Confederate troops are brought in to try and retrieve the cannons off the George Washington. A similar number were brought in on the Union side. Nobody is able to retrieve anything, and it wasn't until sort of notorious sheriff from the Low Country, Sheriff McTeer, had a report from a fisherman of something being out in the creek. They go out there, they retrieve the cannons, and so to this day, if you go to Beaufort, South Carolina, there in front of the Armory, you will find cannons that were on the George Washington at the time of its sinking from there on, again, the farm that I grew up on. What's also interesting, though, is that Stephen Bull's son tragically was killed in the Battle of Bull Run. He became so incensed that there was a skirmish, a little skirmish up the road, a place called Lubico, that he wanders up there. He cuts the heads off a number of Union soldiers, takes them home, boils the heads, and made, quote, Yankee skull drinking cups that are constantly referred to in the letters as I did research on the place growing up. And my point with these different strange stories is you don't need Yankee skull drinking cups. You don't need to bring troops in on one side, troops in on the other. What we all know is that intervention is not free, that there's a cost either at the human level, at the political level, at the financial level. And this notion, again, of what you all are getting at, of saying, how do we avoid that cost, to be very, very important, whether that's illustrated, again, on a farm I grew up on about an hour south of here, or some of what's happened in Charleston over the years, or some of what's happening in the Middle East right now. I'd make just a couple of quick points, and again, I have nothing to offer. You actually have experts that will come and speak to you. I'm here to simply say, welcome to Charleston. I'm glad you're this part of the world. But I'd make these 4 observations. One, what we're doing now, it strikes me, really is building enemies. I mean, the whole point of military power and military force is to bring about change that couldn't otherwise be made. So if you can't make it via diplomacy and statecraft, well, then you'll just have to force the issue with military. And what I think is interesting is in the military, they have a term where they talk about center of gravity. Center of gravity is what could I do to my opponent's position or force that would undermine their ability to bring force in my direction. And what you see happening around the world right now as we have this sort of, half on, half off interventionist strategy is that we're in fact cementing rather than dislocating the real center of gravity from the standpoint of terrorism. It's ideology. It's not number of arms. It's not a number of people. I don't know if you all have seen Ken Burns' documentary on the Vietnam War. It's absolutely fascinating. If you haven't, I'd highly recommend it. But it goes into McNamara's notion of body count. And there on the nightly television when I was a young guy, I remember watching the nightly count. We're winning. There's a bigger body count. Well, we weren't impacting their center of gravity. As a consequence, we all know what happened in Vietnam. You can look at a lot of intervention these days, and you'd see the same phenomenon reoccurring. So the question is, are we in fact impacting center of gravity from the standpoint of the force, or with collateral damage and other? I mean, you could be the greatest house guest in the world, but if you came over to my house and stayed for 20 years, inevitably you'd break some china. One night you might come in a little bit too late. Another morning you might get up too early. There are going to be some rubs if you stay that long. And so you look at our interventionist strategy right now and the way in which, again, we're in fact creating in many cases more enemies than we're not. And we're certainly not undermining the center of gravity that exists on that side of the equation. I would secondly say what has hit me is we're really shredding Congress's role, and I'm sure that Congress and, Ron and other experts are going to get into the details of this. But this notion of treating an AUMF as a blank check is crazy. I mean, here we are, in essence, 20 years later, and we treat it as a blank check. As a consequence, we undermine that which the Constitution made so clear. What the Founding Fathers knew was at the end of the day, body bags don't come back into Washington, D.C. They didn't go to congressional districts across this country, and therefore they wanted members of Congress to sign on the dotted line. If you want to risk financial and human capital, then your name needs to be on it. And that's not what we've done. And as a consequence, we've really undermined Congress's role in the authorization and the use of force. Thirdly, I'd say what's interesting is that we're wearing out troops. So if you were to talk to the folks on armed services, both House and Senate, they would talk about how accident rates are actually going up. They talk about divorce rates. They talk about a lot of things happening in the military today. And the solution is just give us more money. But what you all, again, are getting at is to say, no, let's try actually a different strategy. We don't need necessarily more money, but we need a different strategy in the way that we're employing force and using force around the world. I'll make 2 last points, and I'll sit down, and I look forward to hearing from the experts. I think that we're really sending conflicting signals to friend and foe alike on on again, the use of force. We don't have intervention or non-intervention as a strategy. We've got politically driven intervention as our strategy. And there is a difference. Because if you're going to hold sort of moral authority in these terms, it's got to be one or the other. It's got to be black or it's white. But this notion of a middle ground of, in essence, holding actions, as we saw in Vietnam, simply don't work. And so from a strategic standpoint, if you look at what China is doing in the South China Sea right now, I think it's frightening. I mean, the fact that they're building air bases on reefs and they're clearly establishing their territory in what I think is clearly international territorial waters says, well, boy, if we had an interventionist strategy, I think we'd be making a bit more noise than we are there. We're not. In other cases, if you really want to have moral authority in places like, I won't go into different atrocities, but we've seen a lot of them around the world, then you'd say we got to be involved there. But we're picking and choosing based on very different things. And I think that it erodes, regardless of which side of the equation you might be on, and I know where this group is, it really erodes our ability to have standing as we press forward, either from a non-intervention or from an intervention standpoint. And finally, I'd make this point, which is that we're spending trillions. And Ron was the one that showed me the way back when, because he was country when country wasn't cool when it came to spending. It's gone full circle. It wasn't cool, then it was, and now it's no longer cool. I mean, nobody talks about it all in Washington these days. But it's, with the exception of his son. I think we're at a tipping point as a civilization. You know, it's always the straw that breaks the camel's back. We're remarkably close to really, really bad things happening to our economy, to future inflation, to the value of the dollar, to ultimately every young person's here ability to make a living and sustain a standard of living based on the fact that we're spending more than we can afford. We've done that for a while. But, there was a comedian, I don't remember his name, he said, that which cannot exist forever stops, or something like that. Do you remember the quote? I'm not exactly paraphrasing it right, but it's a good one. Remember it. But that which cannot go on forever won't. That's what it was. And what we have right now is something that can't go on forever. But we're inside a 10-year window. If you look at the debt to GDP numbers, you look at interest cost, there are a lot of indicators out there that say that we're nearing the stopping point. And so I'll leave you with a really depressing quote. Sir Alex Francis Tytler was a Scottish historian who studied history for the whole of his life. He gets to the end of his life, and the quote that's attributed to him was that a democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the voters discover that they can vote for themselves largesse from the public treasury, with the result that a democracy always fails under loose fiscal policy and is generally followed by dictatorship. The average age of the world's great civilizations has been 200 years. These nations have progressed through this sequence: from bondage to spiritual faith to great courage to liberty, liberty to abundance, abundance to selfishness, selfishness to complacency, complacency to apathy, apathy to dependency, and from dependency back again into bondage. And indeed, if you look at the timeline of civilizations across the annals of history, you see that there's absolutely something to get what he was getting at. We're at a tipping point, and for the reasons that I described above, and more than anything, simply based on spending alone and where we are on the spending cycle, it's really important what you all are doing in saying, wait a minute, we need to take a different approach. One last thought on that. Paul Kennedy wrote an interesting book years ago talking about the rise and fall of great powers. It was entitled that. And he talked about how no nation on earth has ever been able to maintain military supremacy without first retaining and maintaining economic supremacy, which makes sense. It's for the reason that Russia and Soviet Union and other places fell. So, again, I just want to say thank you for what you're doing. You're on an incredibly important theme that has everything to do with the kind of America that my four boys will one day inherit, your kids, your grandkids. But this isn't a kid or grandkid thing. This is in our generation, And I think the chickens come home to roost on this issue in the next 10 years. Thanks again for what y'all do. Appreciate it.